Tom Reynolds had always found something oddly comforting about silence. Not the kind of silence that sat in an empty room, but the kind you only got in neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights, neatly trimmed hedges, automatic sprinklers hissing at sunrise, and wind chimes whispering across backyards. It was suburban peace, predictable, private. Which is why, when he saw the envelope stapled to his front door, his gut tightened. No stamp, no official seal, just white paper and a bold red, urgent, HOA violation notice. He tore it open, standing on his porch as the early evening sun cast long shadows across the driveway. The notice was typed in clinical, bureaucratic language. Words like non-compliant, unauthorized modifications, and subject to fine if not corrected within 14 days. At the bottom, violation, unapproved structure in rear yard, visible from public property. Tom's brow furrowed. That wasn't possible. His backyard was surrounded by a solid 8-foot cedar privacy fence, taller than regulation, grandfathered in from before the HOA updated their guidelines. There were no second-story houses nearby, and the alley behind his yard was blocked off due to construction. The new gazebo he'd spent 3 weekends building was completely concealed. Not even a drone could have gotten a clean shot through the canopy of trees he deliberately planted years ago. So how the hell did they see it? He stepped inside and tossed the letter onto his kitchen counter, but the questions followed him like a shadow. Had someone been in his yard? No, that couldn't be. The gates were locked, and his security system. His eyes widened. He walked calmly to his home office and tapped the keyboard, waking his triple monitor setup. His private surveillance system wasn't just about keeping burglars away. It was layered, methodical, and quietly brilliant. 12 high-resolution cameras covered every inch of his property, disguised in fence posts, under eaves, behind ornamental rocks. They fed directly to a 16-terabyte server and uploaded redundantly to a secure cloud. Tom pulled up the logs. No alerts, no motion triggers. But then again, the system filtered out small movements, birds, raccoons, squirrels, and didn't always flag slow, deliberate intrusions. He manually scrolled through the last few days of footage. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then he saw it. Timestamp, Sunday, 4:23 a.m. A shadow moved across the back fence. Then, slowly, a gloved hand appeared on top of the fence, followed by the silhouette of a man climbing a ladder. Tom clicked to zoom. The figure was wearing dark clothes, a ball cap, and carried a flashlight with a narrow beam. He peered into the backyard, scanned for nearly 20 seconds, then retreated, pulling the ladder down with him. Tom leaned forward, adrenaline kicking in. The fence line was 100% on his property. Whoever this was had trespassed, and had done it with intent. Not a curious neighbor, not a city worker, no identification, no warning, and most of all, no permission. He watched the video again, slower this time. Then he saw it. The flash of embroidery on the belt, barely visible when the flashlight shifted. Holy chair. Oakwood Heights Association. Tom didn't speak, but a grin crept across his face. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a breach, and whoever had the gall to sneak onto his property thought they could get away with it. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Tom Reynolds wasn't just another homeowner. He was the quiet eye in the sky. And now, he had a target. Tom watched the footage 3 more times, each pass slower than the last. He adjusted brightness, contrast, frame rate. He paused on the figure's stance, the way he climbed, the arc of his flashlight beam. Every second told a story, and Tom was trained to read them. 4:23 a.m. That wasn't just unusual, it was deliberate. Whoever this was chose a time when nearly the entire neighborhood was asleep, and even porch lights went dark. They wanted to be invisible, but Tom's cameras didn't play by the same rules. He switched feeds. His backyard was covered by 4 different angles, but camera 9, the one embedded inside a solar light at the far end of the yard, had the best view. He paused the frame just as the figure peeped over the fence. The hat dipped low, the flashlight clicked off, and the man leaned slightly forward, surveying what he could through the cracks in Tom's pergola. Then he shifted, just enough for the camera to catch his face. It wasn't perfectly clear, but it didn't need to be. The angle, the posture, the body type, all familiar. Too familiar. Tom didn't even need to run facial recognition, though he did anyway. The software returned a 72% confidence match. Gregory Mason, HOA president, longtime resident, enthusiastic enforcer of rules, and apparently now, trespasser. Tom leaned back in his chair, watching the faint glow of his screens dance across the ceiling. He felt something tighten in his chest, not anger, not fear. Precision. He clicked over to his neighborhood network feed, the one he'd quietly helped build over the years with a handful of like-minded neighbors. Not many people knew about it. It was sold under the guise of neighborhood safety. A few shared cameras on cul-de-sacs and alleyways, just to monitor for break-ins. But what Tom had built was more than that. It was a net, and Greg had just walked into it. He cued the footage from camera 3A, located in a neighbor's garden known 2 houses down. Sure enough, at 4:17 am, a figure crept down the alley carrying a long object under a blanket. A ladder, sloppily wrapped, but unmistakable. Tom tracked the man's progress across 4 different cameras, entering from the east alley, bypassing the construction signs, hugging the fence line, then setting up the ladder near Tom's northeast corner post. It was a straight-up covered operation. Tom exported the footage, cutting a 5-minute highlight reel from all angles. He labeled it plainly, unauthorized access, 5/14/25. Greg Mason, probable ID. He didn't share it. Not yet. Instead, he opened his HOA member portal and reviewed the community bylaws. He bookmarked Section 9.2, trespassing on residential property, and Section 3.1, abuse of authority by board members. Then he clicked open a blank email to that HOA board and typed only one sentence before stopping. Before I escalate this, I'd like to give Greg the chance to explain himself. But he didn't send it, not yet, because something felt off. Why risk everything for a gazebo? It didn't make sense. Greg was meticulous, calculated. This wasn't just enforcement, it felt personal, desperate. Tom stared at the paused footage on his monitor. The expression on Greg's face, tight jaw, eyes darting, wasn't that of a man doing his job. It was the look of someone searching for something. And Tom suddenly wondered if this had nothing to do with the gazebo at all. Tom's mind raced as he stared at the screen. Greg Mason wasn't just snooping, he was hunting. But why? The gazebo was nothing more than a peaceful retreat for Tom, hardly a threat to the neighborhood's order. Tom switched to another feed, this one from a camera mounted discreetly in a neighbor's birdhouse across the street. It caught Greg entering a small community storage shed behind the HOA office earlier that week, well past business hours. Curious, Tom zoomed in. Greg was rifling through stacks of files, maps, property plans, permit applications, and something else. Something Tom didn't recognize at first glance. A thick folder marked surveillance authorization requests. That was when the pieces started clicking. Tom had always been the neighborhood's silent watchman, running a web of surveillance with tacit approval from a few neighbors. But the HOA, they didn't officially monitor anyone's property. Greg, however, seemed to have his own secretive agenda. Maybe the violation letter wasn't just about Tom's gazebo. Tom leaned back, rubbing his chin. If Greg was desperate enough to trespass at night and dig through HOA records, there had to be something big at stake, something Greg was trying to hide. Suddenly, a notification popped up on Tom's phone. A message from a neighbor, Claire, who lived 3 doors down. Tom, have you seen the weird truck parked by the community center? Been there all day, nobody's driving it. Looks like surveillance equipment inside. Tom frowned. He checked the neighborhood feed. The suspicious white van was still parked, cameras and antennas mounted on its roof. It wasn't registered to any resident or city official. Tom's gut told him Greg might have called in backup or worse. Someone was spying on the entire neighborhood, under the guise of safety. Was the HOA president playing a dangerous game? Was Tom's peaceful neighborhood already a chessboard for a bigger conflict? Tom's fingers flew across the keyboard as he tapped into his private mesh network. He started cross-referencing all unusual activity for the past month: late-night visitors, unreported modifications, mysterious vehicles. And there it was, a pattern emerging like a dark thread weaving through the quiet streets. Late-night trespassers weren't new. Several homes reported strange noises, footprints near back gates, things missing, yet no one ever saw the culprit. Until now. Tom realized the neighborhood had unwittingly been under surveillance, but not by him. Someone else was watching. His own cameras, though private, had caught bits and pieces of this shadow operation, but Tom had never linked the incidents until Greg's ladder footage. It was a revelation. The man who'd snuck into Tom's yard wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. He was part of something bigger, a secret network operating in the shadows. Tom closed the files, the weight settling over him like a storm cloud. He couldn't let this go unnoticed. But if Greg knew about Tom's surveillance, and if the HOA board was hiding something, confronting them directly could backfire. Tom had to be smarter. He began drafting an email, not an accusation, but a warning. To the Oakwood Heights HOA board, there is unauthorized surveillance activity occurring within the community. I urge an immediate investigation before it escalates further. But before hitting send, Tom paused. He needed allies. He picked up his phone and dialed Claire. "Claire, it's Tom. Can you meet tonight? We need to talk about the truck and the HOA's extracurricular activities." The line went quiet for a moment before she whispered back, "I'll be there." As he hung up, Tom looked back at his monitors, his quiet fortress of technology. He wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was a guardian, and the night was far from over. The night was unusually still when Claire arrived at Tom's house. She slipped through the back gate, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if expecting shadows to leap from the trees. Oakwood Heights had never felt so fragile. Tom greeted her quietly at the door, his eyes scanning her face for signs of fear or doubt. Claire was one of the few neighbors who'd always trusted Tom's instincts, and tonight, she looked ready to believe him. They settled in the home office, the glow of the surveillance monitors painting their faces in shades of blue and gray. Tom pulled up the footage of the ladder incident. "There's no mistake here," he said. "Greg Mason climbed into my yard, and not just once. He's been digging around the neighborhood, snooping, trespassing, and probably looking for something." Claire frowned. "But why? And what makes you so sure it's him?" Tom hit play on a clearer clip showing the figure's belt buckle, embroidered with the HOA initials. Because the HOA president isn't just nosy. He's using his position to intimidate people. He thinks no one's watching. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been hearing strange things too. Late night knocks on doors, phone calls with no one on the other end. And now this truck. It's like we're being watched from every angle." Tom nodded. "Exactly. And when I tried to bring this up, Greg brushed me off like I was paranoid. He said, 'We have our ways of finding out what's going on.'" Claire shook her head. "That's not reassuring. That's threatening." Tom leaned forward. "That's the gaslight play. He's trying to make us doubt ourselves, question our own eyes and ears. But I've got proof." Just then, Tom's phone buzzed. A message from Greg Mason. "Tom, we need to talk. Stop spreading rumors." Claire's eyes widened. "He knows." Tom stared at the message, heart pounding. "He's trying to intimidate me. But this only confirms how desperate he is. Maybe we should just back off," Claire suggested quietly. "No," Tom said firmly. "Backing off means giving him the power to control the narrative. We need to expose what's really happening." He glanced back at the monitors. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "We're not just neighbors anymore. We're guardians of this community, and it's time we acted like it." Claire nodded, resolve hardening in her eyes. "What's the plan?" Tom smiled grimly. "First, we gather more evidence, and then we take it to the board, publicly." Claire shuddered. "That'll make waves." "Exactly," Tom said. "And sometimes you have to make waves to bring the truth to the surface." As they plotted, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that every move they made was being watched. Because in Oakwood Heights, the watchers were many, and not all of them friendly. Tom's plan was simple in theory, but complicated in execution. Expose Greg Mason without tipping him off. The HOA president had grown reckless, but he was still powerful. A misstep could cost Tom everything. That evening, Tom slipped out after dark and met Claire at the edge of the community park. The suspicious white van was still parked near the maintenance shed, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like black mirrors. Claire peered inside. Still no one around, but those antennas look high-tech, way too much for a neighborhood watch. Tom nodded. Exactly, and I'm betting Greg's behind it. Together, they checked the surrounding area for any signs of surveillance, microphones, hidden cameras, anything that might be feeding information back to Greg or his mysterious accomplices. Claire spotted a small, almost invisible camera lens tucked into the vent of a nearby street lamp. Tom frowned. They're covering their tracks well, but not well enough. Back at Tom's house, he uploaded the ladder footage and the clips of Greg rummaging through HOA files to a secure drive. Then, with a few clicks, he sent an anonymous email to the entire HOA board, except Greg, with a subject line that left no room for misunderstanding. Urgent. Evidence of unauthorized trespassing and surveillance activities. Inside was a link to the video files, along with timestamps and detailed notes. Minutes later, his phone vibrated with incoming messages. "Is this for real?" one read. "We need an emergency meeting," said another. "Greg must answer for this," a third demanded. The message sent ripples through the community like a shockwave. Meanwhile, Greg was already reacting. Tom's neighbors told him the HOA president had gone into a frenzy, making frantic phone calls, deleting files from the HOA server, and calling for an emergency board meeting, scheduled just 2 days away. Tom watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction, but he wasn't done. At dawn, he discreetly posted flyers around the neighborhood, inviting residents to the meeting with a teaser. "Your neighborhood's safety is at stake. Come see the truth." Word spread fast. Some neighbors whispered in disbelief. Others approached Tom with gratitude and questions. On the day of the meeting, tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. The community center's small room was packed. Curious, angry, and wary faces all turned toward the front where Greg sat, looking unusually pale. Tom sat quietly near the back, laptop open, ready to reveal everything. Greg began with a prepared speech about community standards and protecting property values. He painted himself as the victim, a man unfairly targeted by rumor and jealousy. But then Tom stood. "Before we proceed," he said calmly, "I'd like to present some evidence." The room darkened as the projector flickered to life. Frame by frame, the video played, Greg climbing the ladder, peering over the fence, rifling through files. Gasps echoed. Murmurs grew louder. Greg's face hardened, and for the first time, he looked vulnerable. "Those videos are doctored," Greg barked, but his voice lacked conviction. One board member raised a hand. "Mr. Mason, do you deny trespassing on Mr. Reynolds' property?" Greg faltered. Tom smiled quietly. The trap had been set. And now, it was time to see if Greg could escape. The room was thick with tension as the last frame of the footage faded from the screen. Greg Mason sat stiffly, his usual confident mask cracking just enough to reveal the man underneath, cornered, rattled, exposed. Tom felt the weight of every eye in the room on him. Some were wary, others hopeful. They wanted truth, justice, and maybe a little reckoning. Greg finally spoke, his voice low and measured, as if trying to reclaim control. This is a gross violation of privacy," he said. "Yes, I entered Mr. Reynolds' property, but I had reason to believe there were serious violations that affected the entire community." The room buzzed with whispers. Tom interrupted, voice calm, but firm. "Serious violations? Then why not come through the proper channels instead of sneaking in under cover of darkness?" Greg's eyes flicked to the open laptop on the table, showing a live feed from Tom's security cameras. "Because the HOA has been compromised," Greg said, I was investigating a breach in our own security system. Several neighbors exchanged confused glances. Tom seized the moment. You mean the surveillance van? The secret camera in the street lamp? The late-night intrusions into multiple homes? Greg hesitated. Those aren't officially sanctioned by the HOA. But you have a hand in it, Tom said. You've been using intimidation and illegal surveillance to control this neighborhood. You crossed the line when you trespassed on my property. Greg leaned forward, eyes sharp. This is about power, Tom. About control. Without enforcement, the neighborhood falls apart. Tom shook his head. Enforcement doesn't mean breaking laws and betraying neighbors. This is abuse. The chairperson of the HOA board, an older woman named Martha, raised her hand. We need to address the root of this before it escalates further. Mr. Mason, you're suspended from the board pending an independent investigation. A collective murmur filled the room. Greg's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. You're playing with fire. But Tom's gaze didn't waver. We're playing for the future of this community. As the meeting broke up, several neighbors approached Tom, expressing support, relief, even gratitude. Outside, the cool evening air felt like a balm. Yet Tom knew this was far from over. Greg's threats weren't empty. He had influence, resources, and a willingness to fight dirty. Back at home, Tom reviewed the footage one last time. The man who'd snuck into his yard wasn't just a trespasser. He was a symbol of a deeper rot within the HOA. But Tom wasn't afraid. He was ready. Because in Oakwood Heights, the watchers weren't just watching anymore. They were ready to act. Days passed since the showdown. But the tension in Oakwood Heights thickened like fog rolling in off a dark sea. Greg Mason was suspended, but whispers lingered. Some neighbors worried he'd return with a vengeance. Tom kept a vigilant eye on his network, scanning for any sign of trouble. The white surveillance van had vanished overnight, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Yet, something new caught his attention. It was subtle, a flicker, almost imperceptible, on the feeds from the older cameras around the neighborhood. At first, Tom dismissed it as interference, but then he noticed a pattern. At exactly 2:17 a.m. every night, a faint, pulsing light appeared for 10 seconds on one of the utility poles near the park. It was easy to miss unless you knew where to look. Curious and cautious, Tom enhanced the footage. The light blinked in a rhythmic sequence, almost like Morse code. Tom's heart quickened. Someone was sending a message. He cross-referenced the signal with known codes. It spelled out HELP. But from whom? His mind raced back to the files Greg had been searching through, the surveillance authorization requests. What if others in the neighborhood were being monitored, or worse, manipulated? Tom decided to investigate. He traced the light's origin to an old, unused antenna hidden behind thick ivy on a utility pole. Nearby, he found a small weathered box containing a low-powered transmitter. As he examined it, his phone buzzed. An encrypted message popped up from an unknown number. You're not alone. Trust no one but those who watch the watchers. Meet me at the park tonight. Midnight. Tom's pulse surged. Was this a trap or an alley? He knew one thing for sure. The quiet streets of Oakwood Heights were anything but safe. That night, he arrived at the park just before midnight. The mist curled around the benches, shadows dancing in the faint glow of distant streetlights. He scanned the area, empty. Then a figure stepped from behind a tree. It was Claire. You came, she said, voice low. I got your message, Tom replied. What's going on? Claire glanced nervously around. There's more than just Greg. Someone's been using this neighborhood to test surveillance tech. Unauthorized, illegal. Some of us tried to warn the board, but they shut us down. Tom frowned. Why send a signal? Who's in trouble? Claire's eyes darkened. Someone found out too much. They're watching us all, and they're scared. Tom's gaze swept the park, every shadow feeling heavier. So this isn't just about one man's ambition. It's a deeper game. Exactly. Claire pulled out a small, battered notebook. I've been keeping track. Names, dates, strange incidents. There's a pattern to the disappearances, the late-night visits, the unexplained maintenance. Tom flipped through the pages, reading the list of residents who had complained, and then gone silent. A chill settled over him. The surveillance wasn't just for control, it was for something darker. Before Tom could respond, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a sharp rustling from the bushes. Both turned sharply. A shadow darted across the path, disappearing into the trees. Tom's hand instinctively went to his pocket for his phone. "We're not alone." Claire nodded, eyes wide. "We have to be careful. They're watching." As they moved quickly back toward the neighborhood, the hidden signal blinked once more on the pole, pulsing a final urgent message. "Trust no one." Tom's heart pounded as he and Claire hurried through the misty streets of Oakwood Heights, the echo of the shadowy figure's footsteps still ringing in their ears. The neighborhood that once felt like a safe haven was now a maze of secrets and unseen watchers. "Who do you think that was?" Claire whispered, eyes scanning the dark. Tom shook his head. "Doesn't matter right now. We need to get to the bottom of this, fast." Back at his house, Tom locked the door and immediately pulled up the neighborhood surveillance feeds. Every camera, every motion sensor, every hidden lens, all connected to his mesh network, his fortress of watchfulness. Then his phone buzzed again, another encrypted message. "Meet at the old community well. Midnight. Come alone." Tom's mind flashed to the stories about the abandoned well on the edge of town, a place rumored to be a meeting spot for neighborhood troublemakers. He looked at Claire. This could be a trap. She nodded, but her voice was steady. "But it could also be the break we need." The next night, Tom arrived at the well, shadows swallowing the edges of the circle of light cast by his flashlight. He waited, every sense alert. From the darkness, a figure emerged, not threatening, but cautious. "Who are you?" Tom demanded. The figure stepped forward, a woman, mid-40s, with tired eyes and a guarded expression. "My name's Laura," she said softly. "I was part of the HOA board before Greg took over. I tried to expose the surveillance network, but was pushed out." Tom's suspicion mingled with relief. "You sent the signal?" Laura nodded. "Yes, I hacked into the system to warn those who would listen. The HOA isn't just spying, it's colluding with a private security firm. They're collecting data on us to sell to outsiders, to control property prices and push out dissenters." Tom's jaw tightened. That explains the van, the cameras, the intimidation. Laura looked around nervously. "They're watching this conversation too. You need to take this public, Tom. But carefully." Before he could respond, the faint hum of an engine echoed nearby. "Get down," Laura hissed as headlights swept over the clearing. Tom and Laura ducked behind the well's stone wall as a black SUV rolled slowly by, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. When it passed, Tom felt a surge of determination. "We can't fight this alone," he said. "But with Claire, you, and the neighbors, we can take back our community," Laura finished. Over the next days, Tom, Claire, and Laura worked together to gather undeniable proof, documents, video footage, and testimonies from neighbors who had been silenced by fear. At the next HOA meeting, armed with their evidence, they exposed the corrupt network. The private security firm's contract was cancelled, Greg Mason was formally removed, and a new transparent board was elected. Oakwood Heights began healing, the shadow of surveillance lifting. But the final signal, sent from Tom's own network, remained a reminder: trust no one. Because in a world where eyes are everywhere, sometimes the greatest power lies in those who choose to watch the watchers. And Tom Reynolds, he wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was the neighborhood's guardian.